somebody either on your left side or on your right side, okay? If you don't have, just step aside so you have somebody on your right or on your left. Make sure that you don't hold any beers, okay, or anything in your hands. And I want you to raise your hands above you, like that. Turn to your right. Okay, some people did left, never mind. It's a foot coma, I get it. And put your hands on the shoulders of your friend in front of you and give him a nice massage. Little tiny massage after lunch. Put a lot of Bitcoiners love into it, you know. If you're the first one in a row, chill out. You're going to be doing the same thing next round. Okay, nice massage. Now turn around and do the same thing for your friend. Wonderful. That's the way to go. That's the way to spare some love. Okay, guys, perfect. You did amazing. Thank you so much. Clap for yourself. You did a great job. So we are ready with our bodies to kind of put energy into our minds right now. So before I start, when I became a Bitcoin educator or educator in general, and maybe you got into it this way, when you start to explain Bitcoin to your parents or colleagues or friends, the longer you are in Bitcoin, the harder it is to get to the point where you are in the shoes of a newbie, of a beginner. And you start to talk about these things like blockchain, decentralization, privacy, and everything. And we kind of think that the person on the other side totally gets us. They totally understand what we're talking about. But there is something called a curse of knowledge. Have you heard about the curse of knowledge before? This is happening to us when we are down the rabbit hole and it's very hard to get to the mindset of a beginner. There used to be, or there was an experiment in 1990s by Elizabeth Newton on Stanford University. And we're going to do the experiment together. So I'm super excited, or I'm looking forward how the experiment will go. And this is how it went. I'm going to tap a song for you, okay? I'm going to do it on a microphone. Let's see if that works. Okay, that works. So I'm gonna tap a song. It's a song that you should know, right? It's the one that normally people should know, so you should guess it. And my assumption is that 60% of you are gonna guess it, and we will see how many will do that. So listen carefully and try to think. If you think or you're sure that you know what it is, don't scream out. Don't tell anybody. After I finish, you're going to raise your hand if you're really sure, okay? So focus. Let's go for it. Okay, don't scream. Don't scream. Now the question is, who is 100% sure that they know what the song is? Anybody? Maybe one person. Look at that. So my assumption was that 50% of you will just totally get it. There's Arnold. Arnold, what do you think? What's the guess? You guess Happy Birthday. We will see. Who is like 50% sure, like, maybe it can be this song? Any guesses? There is a guess. What's your guess? Happy Birthday as well. Okay. And the truth is, it was a happy birthday. So clap for you guys. You heard it correctly. Now, I'm going to tap it again, and I'm 100% sure that all of you will hear it. So let's try it again. Is there anybody who had no idea that it was a happy birthday? Did you have a birthday in your life sometime, sir? One day, yeah. So this is what's happening in our brain. This is called the curse of knowledge. The song is playing in our minds, and we think that it's playing in the minds of our students, in the minds of our parents, in the minds of our colleagues and friends. And we are thinking like, of course they know what is decentralization. Of course they know what is open source, what is this and that, how Bitcoin kind of works. But we are cursed by the knowledge, and this happens to a lot of managers or leaders in the companies. They put the team together, they have a briefing, they say something important like, hey, we need to put 100% into our work, we need to work harder. But it's so vague, it's so general that one song in one people's mind or person's mind is, okay, so the next morning when I go to work, I'm going to pick up a phone and start to call new clients. Another person goes and starts writing random emails across the internet and trying to get sales. So we think that we were very clear and specific, but in reality, people really didn't get it, and people get their own song in their minds. So we need to be very, very careful to get the right song across and get in context. And this is where the Bitcoin analogies come in. And this is like a very powerful tool to use in your Bitcoin education. And I'm sure that you are educators here as well. All of us are. We are something called a micro-educator. So even if we are talking to our parents, family, and friends, we're always educating. So a couple of the analogies I want to bring that I think are powerful and not very talked about in various concepts. And if you have a concept in Bitcoin that you don't have analogy for, you can later on bring it up and we can discuss it or see which analogy we can really use for that. So the first thing I'm hearing, when I'm talking to Bitcoin is like, okay, how can we believe that Satoshi will not just appear and just cancel everything? Or he just presses the red button and the Bitcoin is gone. And of course we say, hey, the Satoshi, it's open source, you can read it, everything, but what does it really mean, open source? For people who are not into tech, it's a word that we are not familiar with. So how I explain the open source. Imagine you're going to a restaurant and you order a food. Just like, for example, here we received a burger. There was a gentleman bringing a burger. I'm like, wonderful, this is the best thing ever happening. People bring me food. I love it. I love to be here. But for example, you're allergic to something. And you come to a restaurant and you order, sir, I would like to have this beautiful salad, but please be sure that you don't put any peanuts into it, because I'm allergic to peanuts, I can literally die. The restaurant, in this sense, is kind of a closed-door system. You need to trust the chef. You need to trust that they will really follow the rules, that they will not put the peanuts in and they will not kill you. So basically, it's a black box you need to trust. Instead, if you cook your meal yourself, in your home, this is where you see the whole recipe, everything, every line of the code of that food, and you put that stuff into it. So suddenly, this is the open source approach. You are cooking your own food, you know exactly what goes in, and you know what you're putting in, and that you're not going to die because you're not putting into the peanuts. So using the analogy of a restaurant is something that worked a lot in my education journey, where people are like, okay, so this is kind of like where I see something or where I need to trust somebody, and when I don't need to trust because I can do everything myself, right? So the element of decentralization, or like the open source approach, that's one of the powerful ones. And based on this recipe analogy, you can talk about concepts like decentralization and protection from the government. So the next kind of the next question I'm getting when I'm talking to people about Bitcoin is like, okay, how come the governments cannot stop it? Like, what is preventing them? And then you tell them, hey, it's decentralized. They cannot switch it off. Really? Because we have the softwares, they've been hacked many times. So how can you explain the decentralization element? Let's look back at our recipe analogy. So imagine you have a book of recipes. And this book is multiplied and copy-pasted on millions of copies around the world. And what you can do, imagine you don't like the recipe. Imagine you take a pizza margarita and you put pineapple on it, right? Actually, I love it. People hate me for that, but I love pineapple on my pizza. But imagine you want to change the recipe of margarita. Of course, you can take a book of recipes of Italy, and in the margarita recipe, you can say like, add pineapple into my pizza. And then you're like, hey, I changed the source code. I changed this thing. Well, you did, but only in your own book. You didn't influence any recipe around the world, and nobody's right now cooking margaritas the new way with your pineapple. So this is the strength of Bitcoin code, right? The same with a book. Or with a different book, let's imagine Harry Potter, right? I believe you read Harry Potter. If don't, spoiler alert, Dumbledore died, right? So imagine you hate that Dumbledore died. And imagine you want to change this. What you can do, you can go to a bookstore and buy this book and change it in your own book, but you're not changing the story of Harry Potter, right? For you to change that, you would need to find every single book in the world, every Harry Potter copy, and change it in that one, which is practically impossible, right? And this is where people understand this, like, okay, that's pretty powerful. Or imagine a government hating a Bible or any book, and they would like to burn all of them. they would need to go to every person's house owning a Bible, grab it from them. They even don't know where the Bibles are stored. They would need to put them on one pile and just burn them. Again, practically impossible with all the manuscripts, with all the digital copies. And this is like the huge power that protects Bitcoin. So if you speak about the analogy of book and relate it to things like decentralization, protection from the change of the code, from the government, even you can bring the Satoshi. Like, okay, Satoshi can appear. Of course, we don't know if he died or not. Actually, we have on Roatan a Satoshi's grave. If you ever want to go to Roatan, we have a dive site called Satoshi's Grave. You remember that? And there is a huge Bitcoin logo underneath the water, 10 meters down, a little treasure chest with old coins and stuff. So Satoshi died and is buried there. But even if he appeared, what he can do, he can only take his book and change his code within, not in all the books around the world. Right? And this is the powerful concept. And then people grab it like, okay, now it makes sense what decentralization really means. Now it makes sense why government cannot turn Bitcoin off, because they would need to find every book in the world. And that's practically impossible, right? And coming to Satoshi open source, what I also use is mathematics. I used to teach mathematics. It's one of the topics I love. And when I use slides and the topic of decentralization or Satoshi comes in, I show a picture of a guy from antique Greek. And I ask the kids and students, like, okay, so who do you think it is? And they're like, okay, there's some Greek guy, maybe mathematician. It's Pythagoras. And I'm like, okay, why I show Pythagoras? Because imagine you're going to a math class or your math teacher, and the next chapter today is Pythagoras' theorem. You start with that, and then suddenly a kid just raised his hand and said, but I don't think the Pythagoras theorem really works. I don't think we can trust it because I don't know who was Pythagoras. Was it a good guy? Was it a bad guy? Was he black, white, purple? We don't know. Was he Christian? Was he Muslim? How can we trust Pythagoras' theorem? You as a student or you as a teacher of math would be like, what the fuck, guys? Like, we have math. We can prove it. And exactly the same thing applies for Bitcoin. We can prove everything. It's open source. We can read it as the recipe of margarita pizza. We can see it ourselves. It's not a black box. And it doesn't make sense to put person with an idea, because that idea worked 1,000 years ago, today, and in 1,000 years. It's something that was discovered, right? Just like with Bitcoin, it's a discovery. It's a one-time thing, right? We discovered Bitcoin, even if it would somehow die and would be deleted, it's all in our minds. We know how the proof of work is connected with the blockchain and the decentralization. So to kill Bitcoin, it's impossible. Like, all the Bitcoiners would need to die at the same time, right? So we are the social layer protecting Bitcoin, right? And this is where you need to draw a line when you're educating Bitcoin, when you need to draw a line between a person and an idea. That's where people get like, so we don't need to know who is Satoshi. We don't need to care if he's an NSA, CIA, or if he's buried on Roatan, because the idea lives on and is verifiable mathematically. Just like the Pythagoras theorem don't depend on Pythagoras, right? So these are the things that the more you speak about it in this way, in this understandable manner, tangible, that works the best. So we got open source, we got decentralization. Something I use a lot when I talk about the mining in general. You know, there are concepts like hash function, mining, proof of work, and all of it. So my question to you, what do you think is one of the, or like an example of proof of work from our physical life, from our everyday life? What would you name a proof of work? Yes? one. Sorry, one more time? You build a house, okay. So the proof of work is you see a house, you know that it doesn't come up like that. Somebody need to really stack bricks on top. Nice proof of work. Yes, somebody was screaming from there. Summer body. Yeah, I wish I would have one. Maybe I will get one on El Zonte on Sunday. But yeah, the summer body, I mean the tan or the muscles. Like, muscles is a great proof of work because it's hard to get and it's easy to verify. Just like in Bitcoin, it's something that's super hard to really generate. Find a block header of a block that has 20 zeros on front and hash it. That's super hard to do. But to verify it, you just do it like that. So a physical body with muscles, so Arnold Schwarzenegger is a good proof of work. My question, a tricky question to you is like, what do you think is the proof of work of gold? One more time. But if somebody, because there is a lot of misconceptions about what is a proof of work of Bitcoin, and I will get into it. But what is a proof of work of gold? You need to mine it, that's true. But what would you name is the proof of work in the gold world? One more time. Structure or property. Like, essentially, it's the gold itself. Once you see a gold, that's itself a proof of work. Why? Because seeing a gold means that nobody can come up with the gold artificially in the lab. And this is very important because in many other elements, if you see an element, you can be like, okay, this could be mined, this could be created in a lab, this could be somehow artificially made up. So there's no way to know that if the work was really done behind it. But with gold, one of the only elements that we can really be sure that nobody mixed silver with copper and just somehow created gold. Like, it really needed to be mined. You don't know when, because the atom doesn't carry history, but you're sure that it needed to come from the earth crust. It needed to come from the core of the earth. In the end, it came from the stars that died, so we could have gold and carbon in our bodies here. So it's like super crazy to think about it even. But gold itself is a proof of work. When I teach history of money, I'm showing these stones, the rice stones. Do you know that? These huge circular stones with the hole inside. So what is the hole inside? The hole inside is basically the proof of work. Because the only money that was accepted were the money that had a hole inside of it. There were two reasons for it. One, the practical one, was carrying around. Even the big stones, from time to time, they needed to bring them from different islands. So they stick a wooden, basically a palm tree into it, and 10 people just carrying the, couple of hundreds of kilos of stone. But more important reason for the hole in the stone was the proof of work. Because to make the stone, to make the hole in the stone, took insane amount of energy. And they had, at the time, very basic tools. So to really create it take days and weeks. And so everybody accepted money only when there was a hole inside of it. So that's pretty crazy. Like, something that you don't see, like the material that is not there, that's basically the proof of work. Like, very interesting concept, right? And what happened after when these currency inflated, the problem was that there was a guy who brought tools into the island and they made these stones much faster. So they basically lost their value because suddenly it wasn't that much proof of work. It was so much easier to create these stones, and basically there was a huge dispute on the island and the money stopped to exist, right? So, and coming to like what is the proof of work in Bitcoin, what would you say is the proof of work in Bitcoin? Any guesses? Hash power? Okay. Anything else? One more time. Energy spending. This is all like what's happening before, right? But proof of work is something that is easy to verify but hard to do. So what is the easy to verify thing in Bitcoin? Bitcoin address. You know that it had to be mined. So in terms of Bitcoin, it's basically this 20 zeros or a certain amount of zeros in the hash of the block. Because to get that, if you know the mathematics behind it, there's no way to guess it. You only need to try and put error, like trial and error thing. And the analogy I'm using for that, for hashing, or especially something that's easy one way, hard the other, is mixing the colors. Maybe you heard this analogy before. So imagine I give you two colors, and you mix them together, and you get a third color. And you can look at it and you see it. It's pretty easy. You mix two colors, get a third one, easy process. But if I gave you a third color and I asked you, so what two colors did I mix together to really get this one? There's no way for you to just remove these two things from apart. You need to trial and error. You need to mix two colors in certain amounts, see if the third color is the same one. If not, you reverse the process, you start again. Mix another two colors, certain amounts. Do I have the same one? No. So this is kind of a real world example of actually hashing, hash functions. Easy to do in one direction, easy to verify, but hard to reverse. So one thing or another analogy of a one-way function is mixing milk and coffee. Imagine you put a milk into coffee, you mix it clockwise, you have a coffee with milk. If you start to mix it anti-clockwise, you don't separate milk and coffee anymore. It's not possible. You need to manipulate every molecule of that thing to separate milk and coffee. So this is kind of, if you speak to somebody and tell them, oh, hash functions are this one-way function mathematics, what the heck is that? Like, if people don't know math, they have no way to know what is a one-way function. But if you tell them, oh, imagine dropping a milk to a coffee, and you cannot undo it easily, that's like, okay, I get it. Even the growth of these trees and plants, it's a one-way function. We cannot put this tree back to the seed and just carry it around. It's not possible anymore, right? So the time itself is a one-way function. And another thing I'm using for hash functions is a meat grinder. So imagine you take a beautiful steak into the meat grinder, you roll it, and you have a minced meat on one side. If you try to stick it the other way around and go anti-clockwise, you don't get a beautiful steak anymore, right? One-way function, easy to do in one direction, impossible to do it in the other direction. That's why I call hash functions or hashes a digital excrement. You know, you eat a food, goes out, don't try to do it the other way around, okay? Doesn't work. So these kind of analogies, something from real world, definitely like helps a lot for people to understand the basics of Bitcoin so that they can kind of go deeper and they can be like, oh, I don't need to be afraid that Satoshi can switch it off, because it's just like with Pythagoras theorem, or just like with the book, with the Bible, with the Harry Potter, just like with the recipe. And this thing will stick in their minds and they will carry them around and they can then tell it to their friends and their families, right? The one analogy I like a lot is the mempool. The mempool and fees. So you know what is a mempool, right? Do you know where is mempool located? Internet? On your node, exactly. And some people think there is one mempool. There is one centralized place where all the transactions go. No. Every node has their own mempool. And the analogy that very works well, and there's a website built for that, is this one. Imagine a mempool as a bus station, and transactions being people coming to wait for the bus. And every 10 minutes, there is a bus leaving with like 40 places. So when you start to explain it, you can connect multiple elements of Bitcoin into that analogy. One is the 10-minute block time, like a heartbeat of a Bitcoin, right? Bus coming, leaving every 10 minutes on average. 40 places in the bus, representing maximum limit of 4 megabytes, virtual megabytes of data being in the block size, right? So that's another connection into it. And people are waiting outside, wanting to get to the bus. And it works in a very, I would say, capitalistic way. It's not like first come, first served, but who pays more gets into the bus. So imagine there's like just 10 people waiting on a bus station, and you come there and you see like, okay, the next bus gonna take us all. Why should I pay an expensive ticket? I need to actually pay for the ticket. These were the early days of Bitcoin. There were almost all the initial transactions had no fees attached, because every miner was just taking whatever was around there, right? Today, without the fees, we cannot get in, which is good. Because imagine if that bus station would work, or if Bitcoin would work as a regular queue, first comes, first served, it would be spammed immediately by any government, and the Bitcoin wouldn't work at all. So it's beautiful that Bitcoin is capitalistic, because that's why it really works. So now imagine another day, you come to the bus station, you want to leave again to El Zonte from Salvador, want to have a good time on the beach, but suddenly is the finish of adopting Bitcoin. There's 2,000 people waiting on a bus station. And you're like, damn it, you know, I want to go swimming, I want to go surfing, but there's 2,000 people waiting and every bus takes only 40 people. So what can I do? Well, I need to pay more expensive ticket. So suddenly you buy, instead of $1, you pay $5 for a ticket, and you go in front of everybody who has cheaper tickets. And you're standing there, you're number 10, and there's somebody, you know, like say Max Kaiser wants to go surfing as well. He's like, fuck this shit, I don't want to stay in line, $20. And suddenly there becomes an auction to get to the bus. If you say like, I don't care, I can go to the bus in 2 hours, I have only €5 to spend, you just keep waiting. So this is the analogy that works pretty well with understanding how fees influence who gets first to the block, and why it's important that it's based on the money spent and not on who comes first, because then Bitcoin would be gone in the first years or like months of Bitcoin. And there is a beautiful page called TX Street, which basically is a visual representation of this bus station. So you see all transactions coming in as a people flocking in. 5 minutes? Okay. Last 5 minutes, right? Okay. So all transactions coming in, people waiting. Another nice analogy that you can use on top of this bus station analogy is an analogy of SegWit. Probably you heard about SegWit. You know, that's where I got into Bitcoin in those like block size wars. I imagine my first meetup, friend of mine, a Bitcoin maxi, talking about the SegWit 2x. I was like, what the heck is that? There were like 80 people, a packed room. I thought I learned about the basics, and he was just, no, this 2x, it's important. I was like, what the hell is this guy talking about? A lot of people got discouraged. Sadly, I'm lucky I didn't get. But the SegWit thing basically separates part of the transaction data and put it outside of the block. So a nice analogy on that, which is visible on the Take Street, is imagine you have a bus, and then behind the bus you have a carrier for luggage. And you as a transaction, you're the one carrying the luggage. So before SegWit, you put all the luggage on your next to you, sitting in a bus. So basically the luggage took a space of one person. So you couldn't fit 40 people in, only 10 with all the luggages. And suddenly guys, brilliant guys came in and was like, why are we carrying the luggages here? We can carry the luggage in the back of the bus. So we just coded a carrier where people can put their luggage, and suddenly we can fit 40 people inside of the bus instead of 10. That was the max 1 megabyte limit before SegWit. And with all these analogies, you can just build one up on the other, and you can really, like, this works beautifully with kids. When we do education in Roatan with Fidel, in Slovakia, we play a lot of games. We play games of bus stations, of rolling dice and mining with throwing dices, increasing difficulty. Imagine you have 10 dices and you need to roll 5 ones. If you increase the difficulty, let's say I set up 1 minute windows for block time, and if the kids are getting it every 20 seconds or 30 seconds, we increase the difficulty. How we do that? Instead of 5 ones, they need to throw 6 ones. And suddenly they are understanding, okay, so we want to keep the heartbeat of Bitcoin 1 minute, or in general 10 minutes. If it's more, if it's slower, then we decrease the difficulty, right? And with all these analogies, you can build up games around them. You can build up stories around them. You can build a whole education session just with analogies. And this is an amazing way how people can really get the general idea. And the more they're going to educate themselves, the more deeper they're going to go and understand the concept itself.